reactivated. Let's talk about this and more with Congressman Adam Schiff of Burbank. The Democrat is the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, good to see you.
Good to see you, Alex.
So what should we make of what is happening in Ukraine right now, and how does that affect the average person that is watching here home in Southern California?
Well, there are over 100,000 Russian troops now on the border of Ukraine. Russia invaded Ukraine once in the past, and they seem poised to do so again. But this looks like it could be an even worse invasion. They could roll tanks into Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, for example. In terms of what Americans can expect, the president has made it clear we're not going to war with Russia over Ukraine, but we are going to be supplying weapons to Ukraine. We already are, to help Ukrainians defend themselves, to make sure Putin knows this would be very costly for him to invade Ukraine. And we're sending our own troops to some of the neighboring countries to reinforce our commitment to NATO, to make sure that our NATO allies understand that we have their back.
Isn't that kind of a mixed message, that it's really bad what Russia is doing, but we're not willing to send any troops to deal with it? Do you understand that's kind of confusing?
Well, I think it's important that the president make clear to Americans we're not going to war with the Russians. So I think it's important for the president to say that. But I also think it's important for the president to tell Putin, and this is one way of telling him, that if he thinks by invading Ukraine, it's going to have the effect of pushing NATO assets away from Russia. In fact, the opposite will happen. The opposite happened last time Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine, and that is we moved NATO assets closer to Russia. So I think this is a very important step, part of an effort at deterrence. It may not be enough. The weapons may not be enough. The threatened economic sanctions, which will be devastating, might not keep Putin out of Ukraine. But I think we're doing everything we should be doing to deter him and also make it costly if the Russians do invade.
Let's talk about another issue right now. You are a member of the January 6th Commission. This week, President Trump making news, the former president, saying that if he gets elected again, he may pardon all of the people that were responsible for January 6th who are now behind bars. What do you make of that? And is that in itself, witness tampering?
Well, it's really shocking. The president's saying basically these people who attacked police officers, who beat them, broke their bones, sprayed them with chemicals, gouged them with flagpoles, that he's going to give them a pardon because they were using this violence in the service of his goal to overturn the election. He also now acknowledges that's what he was trying to do, is overturn the election. I think it just goes to show, if we needed another fresh reminder of his basic unfitness for office. But it also, I think, is part of a pattern of dangling pardons in front of people who do his bidding. He did that in the Russia investigation. He did it in the Ukraine investigation. Indeed, he did go on and pardon people who lied to Congress to cover up for him. So, he governs like a racketeer, and now he's acting like a racketeer as a former president.
You continue to investigate witnesses that are willing to talk with you. We know some members of Trump's inner circle are not. Some of the folks you've been talking to recently, though, are very close to former Vice President Mike Pence, including his chief of staff recently testified before your committee. What did you learn from him?
As you might not be surprised to learn, I can't go into what witnesses have testified or the contents of their testimony. I can say, though, that we've had a lot of people cooperate with our investigation, some very high-placed in the former administration, that's shedding a lot of insights into multiple lines of effort by the former president and others to overturn the election. January 6th is what most people think of, but there were a lot of other efforts that are coming to light, efforts to suborn local elections officials or statewide elections officials, efforts to use the Justice Department to discourage states from sending electors. And there have been public reports this week of memos written to justify seizure of voting machines by the federal government under Donald Trump. So, a lot of, I think, very important information is coming to light through our investigation, through good journalism, and we hope to present all that to the American people.
Is Mike Pence going to testify before your group? Has he volunteered to testify before your group?
We would certainly like him to testify before the committee. He was the subject of this vigorous pressure campaign by the former president to get him to ignore his constitutional duty, and as the former president had just admitted, to overturn the election. And, you know, you got to take a moment to take that in. The former president admitting he wanted his vice president to overturn the election. So he's quite a central figure, the vice president. We have made it clear we love for him to come in voluntarily. We haven't extended that formal invitation to him yet. We've been sequencing it, so we do other less significant witnesses first. But I think that time is coming soon.
Very interesting. Well, there's, I guess, a lot more to come on this. If you want the congressman's account of what happened on January 6th, you can pick up his book, which is called Midnight in Washington, How We Almost Lost Our Democracy and Still Could. So much happening every day. Congressman Adam Schiff, we appreciate your repeated visits.
Thank you, Alex.